Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with us today taking a look at another light gun game of sorts in the form of Revolution X. Originally an arcade game that saw release in March of 1994, it was then ported to a wide variety of systems including the Mega Drive / Genesis, DOS, PlayStation, Super Nintendo and of course the Sega Saturn, with the Saturn version coming out in March of 1996 in both the PAL and North American territories before coming out in Japan the following month in April of 1996. Now, why do I say light gun game of sorts, you ask? Well, when it was originally released in the arcade, it was a light gun game which supported up to 3 players, as you had mounted machine guns on the cabinet to play the game. But unfortunately, when it was ported over to the home systems, light gun support was completely removed, meaning the experience was a completely different thing at home. The story for the game revolves around you, the player, traveling to Club X in Los Angeles to see Aerosmith perform live, but the band is captured by the New Order Nation and their commander, Headmistress Helga, as they have declared war on youth culture and have banned all forms of music, television, magazines and video games. It is of course your job to rescue the band members and destroy anything to do with the NON installations spread across the various locations around the world before travelling to London to defeat Helga head on. Like always, I'll be talking about how it performs in regards to visual, sound, gameplay, content and lifespan, and ultimately whether it's still worth playing today and if it has any chance of all at entering my PAL top 10 or worldwide top 10, or indeed much more likely compete for a place in my Saturn Bottom 10. So once the main menu comes around, you'll see you've got a choice of 1 player, 2 player and options, and when you head into options you'll see you've got a choice of changing the difficulty, the cursor speed, setting the music and sound effects volume levels and configuring your control pad, which in all fairness isn't really required as you only need 2 buttons to play the game. So like I always do, I'm going to start with the visuals first, and right off the bat I can say this is one of the very worst looking Saturn games that I have ever played in my entire life. We get absolutely awful enemy designs which are made up of incredibly low quality sprites and poor quality animations. We get drab low quality backgrounds for all of the areas that you travel through, and the feeling that if this game had even been released as a launch title for the system, it would have been absolutely panned for its visuals back then too. As an example, just take a look at the quality of the enemy models up close. You get the point. You do get some digitized sprite versions of the Aerosmith members within the game, but naturally they too look truly awful. I won't deny I thought long and hard actually about whether there was anything positive at all that I could say in terms of the visuals within the game or how the game performed, with the only remotely positive thing being the multi-layered backgrounds in some of the stages, but even then that's a push. The game also suffers from terrible slowdown in places, which is unforgivable considering it's a purely 2D based game, something that the Saturn excelled with. If all of this wasn't enough, the game actually runs at half the frame rate of the arcade version, which doesn't help in targeting fast moving objects as they're actually very difficult to hit. In all fairness, I could go on forever about how everything in the game looks dreadful, but I won't. You get the message. Revolution X looks crap. Moving on to sound effects and music, and we do get some short clips of Aerosmith songs through the game, which are just played in loop in pieces in places, but unless you're a big Aerosmith fan, then you probably won't really take much notice of this. And in all fairness, the music throughout all of the stages is incredibly drab and repetitive, and with myself not being a fan of Aerosmith or really being aware of many of their songs, I can only hope and pray that the quality of their music in general is a lot higher than the quality of the majority of pieces on offer here in Revolution X. I will say though that the highlight of the entire game is the song Dude Looks Like a Lady that plays after you've completed the game and the credits are rolling, and I guess that really sums up the overall quality of the game when you say that the credits at the end of the game are the highlight. In regards to the sound effects, they are incredibly repetitive, primarily because they're made up of the sound of your gun repeatedly firing non-stop for just about the whole entire game, and the noises that seemingly every single enemy makes when you gun them down, meaning the overall feeling for Revolution X in regards to sound is that it's much more likely to make your ears bleed than bring you any kind of pleasure. But if you are desperate to hear some of the samples from within the game, then here you go. Next up is gameplay, and if there's one thing that you can do to kill the enjoyment of a light gun game when porting it to home consoles, it is of course to completely remove light gun support, and that is exactly what Rage Software did with Revolution X. What this means is that you have a clunky, unresponsive and outright frustrating game in regards to gameplay, mainly because the large majority of people would have had to play this game with a standard control pad. This means that you cannot quickly target enemies or items that you want to shoot, with it also making smaller targets very hard to hit as well. The bizarre thing is the game does actually support the Saturn shuttle mouse, even though this was exclusively released in Japan. Admittedly, the game is slightly better to play with the mouse, as you can be far more precise in where you want to aim. Unfortunately though, it's still not ideal when targeting fast moving enemies, and so still remains frustrating to play in this way also. In regards to the setup for the game, you move through the levels gunning down hordes of enemies whilst trying to find and rescue the members of Aerosmith and eventually defeat the final boss, Headmistress Helga. In all fairness, the structure of the game is absolutely fine, as you also get to choose what order you do some of the levels in after you've gained access to Aerosmith's car. But once again, there are major flaws in the levels, primarily the boss fights and other large opponents, as they require an insane amount of damage to be destroyed or defeated, which simply further adds to the frustration of the game. In terms of the firepower at your disposal, you have a machine gun and the ability to fire CDs at the enemies, with these being the more powerful of your two attacks, but they are admittedly in limited supply. You can collect additional CDs though throughout the game by shooting them once they appear on the screen, with the silver CDs being worth 3 and the gold ones being worth 10. You can also upgrade your machine gun to the super gun, which does do 5 times the damage as well. If you're lucky, you can also collect flaming laser discs, which will do more damage than your standard CDs, and also collect a shield, which will protect you for 35 hits. There are also a few other things that you can pick up along the way, like the skull bombs, which can destroy everything on screen, wheatgrass shakes, which will increase your energy, and the wings, which will give you large points bonuses and are awarded when you rescue a member of the band. Whilst the weapon upgrades are nothing special, it is relatively novel, being able to fire CDs at enemies and watch them explode, but even this isn't enough to change the fact that Revolution X is a sluggish, frustrating, and most importantly, highly unenjoyable experience. Moving on to content and lifespan, and there are 6 standard levels on offer within Revolution X, and the game will take just under an hour to play through, which for a light gun game, or indeed a game that is supposed to be a light gun game, absolutely fine. There is one additional bonus level that you can play through if you complete the game whilst rescuing all members of the band, something that I simply couldn't be bothered to do myself, and I had absolutely no desire to play through the game again to see this, or indeed see the true ending that the game gives you once you rescue the whole band. The big problem with the content on offer is the fact that the majority of the game sees you facing off against the same enemies over and over again, with them re-popping on the screen in the same places continually, meaning the game gets incredibly boring due to the sheer repetitiveness of what's on offer here. When this is combined with the fact that the game simply isn't fun to play, you will need incredible mental fortitude and iron willpower to put yourself through this dreadful experience. There is, though, indeed, 2-player support, so if you are hell-bent on playing this game, you could indeed attempt to force a friend or family member to play with you so that you could share the misery with them rather than absorbing it all for yourself. In terms of any replay value whatsoever, like I said previously, there are 2 endings to the game, but the likelihood of you wanting to play through this game twice from start to finish is incredibly unlikely. I thought I'd chuck in some Saturn and PlayStation footage side by side so you could just see what they're like against one another. It is pretty close in all fairness, although the PlayStation version does run slightly better and it does also look slightly better too, but both games still have that horrible thick black border at the top of the screen, which does reduce the screen size quite a bit. One thing I did notice about the PlayStation version though is that at the start of the game you seem to get stuck facing off against the same 2 recycling enemies over and over again, whereas the Saturn version progresses much quicker. Now, I don't know whether this was a bug, but I did try playing the game several times, and it seems to take forever and a day, so I just gave up in the end. But overall, the PlayStation version is probably the better of the 2 versions, presuming you can actually get past this screen. As always, we do have final questions, but they're slightly different this week. Of course, the first one is whether Revolution X is still worth playing in any way, shape or form nowadays, and rather than is Revolution X good enough to be in my PAL top 10 or my worldwide top 10, the second question is whether Revolution X is so bad that it enters my bottom 10. Now, there is no way that I could recommend anybody plays this game whatsoever. It was panned by pretty much every publication when it was released, and rightfully so, as the console port of the game has absolutely no redeeming features whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. The Aerosmith license is a complete waste of time, and my assumption is that only hardcore fans would have purchased this game upon release and enjoyed it somewhat. In regards to whether Revolution X enters my Saturn Bottom 10, you can see that going up the screen right now, and as you can imagine, it's full of games that aren't particularly very good. Going down the list, we've got arguably a game that will remain in top spot even if I reviewed every single game on the system, in the form of the Crow City of Angels, a game that looks, sounds and plays absolutely terribly. Moving further down, we've got a couple of horrific tennis games there that brought me no enjoyment whatsoever, in the form of Virtual Open Tennis and Breakpoint, with the dreadful Striker 96th in 4th and Rise 2 Resurrection in 5th. Now, as bad as Revolution X is, I would still prefer to play it over all of these games in positions 1 to 5, moving down to Courier Crisis, and although it's a long time since I played this game, I do not remember enjoying it one bit. If it was the PlayStation version of Hardcore 4x4 in 7th, I would say that's definitely better than Revolution X, but unfortunately the Saturn version is absolute turd, much like High Octane in 8th. 9th and 10th is a little bit more interesting, because after a lot of thought, I decided that Battle Monsters and Euro 96 are both better than Revolution X, meaning that Revolution X enters my Saturn Bottom 10 in 9th position, with Battle Monsters moving down to 10th, and UEFA Euro 96 finally escaping and no longer being classed as one of the worst 10 games on the system that I've looked at so far. Now, of course, my bottom 10 is completely my personal preference, and I have had people comment on some of these reviews claiming that these games aren't as bad as I've made out, with one person even stating that Euro 96 was the best football game of the entire era, even better than the likes of ISS Pro Evolution 2. Go figure. Like always though, everything I've said on this video is my opinion based on my experience of Revolution X, and as always I want to hear everybody else's thoughts too. Did you buy Revolution X when it came out on the Saturn or the PlayStation, or did you play it when it was released in the arcades back in 1994, and if so, how does it compare to the Saturn version? Let me know your thoughts down below, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.
It's up to you now. Find our car and stop the new order.